In this very in-depth forecast, the Midwest is currently being monitored for severe weather as a possible derecho is expected to bring widespread damaging wind gusts greater than 75 miles per hour, a couple of tornadoes embedded in this storm, and scattered large hail. Everything you need to know on Project Gladiator. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Project Gladiator weather forecast. Today I'll be covering the weather for July 15th of 2024. For today we do have an enhanced risk for the Midwest into portions of the Ohio River Valley for southwestern Michigan, northern Indiana, southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois, and eastern Iowa. This is going to be the primary thing that we're going to be covering in today's forecast, and this is going to be associated with a possible derecho that's going to be moving through this region. The D word has been thrown around by many people already, including me. And derecho is entirely possible for this location, as we will see the primary risk of widespread damaging wind gusts that are going to be greater than 75 miles per hour. In other words, significant damaging wind gusts associated with a powerful MCS that's going to be moving through this region. So I am going to be solely relying on describing it as a powerful MCS instead of a derecho, because if it isn't a derecho, I don't want to be too far off from what it truly is, and it will be a powerful MCS across this region with embedded significant damaging wind gusts. We also have two other slight risks, one for the New England corridor for New York State and northern into central Pennsylvania, as well as a slight risk for the high plains and the central plains for western Nebraska, northwestern Kansas, northeastern Colorado, and southeastern Wyoming, where we could see the potential for some scattered severe thunderstorms, as well as an additional marginal risk for southern Arizona there. Risks for today do include a 5% tornado risk for the enhanced risk region, and this is going to be one of the primary risks, but definitely not as big as the risk for damaging wind gusts for today, but we could see the potential for a couple of embedded tornadoes in this powerful MCS, as well as an isolated risk for a tornado or two, for an additional 2% tornado risk for the New England corridor for New York State in western New York, including Buffalo in New York. And then as far as our damaging wind gust risk goes, we do have a 30% for the enhanced risk region. This is going to be the primary fueling risk for this enhanced risk region, including the possibility for significant damaging wind gusts that are going to be greater than 75 miles per hour, indicated by that the hatched area. We also have two other 15% damaging wind gust risks, one for both slight risk locations, and that's going to be the primary fueling risk for both of these additional slight risk locations, where we could see the potential for some scattered damaging wind gusts. We also do have a 5% damaging wind gust risk for southern Arizona, where we could see the potential for some isolated damaging wind gusts. And then for our hail risk, we do have a 15% risk for damaging or for large hail for the western half of the enhanced risk region in the Midwest, where we could see the potential for some scattered large hail, but this is going to be more on the back burner of today's risk, but is still going to be entirely possible. And then we also do have a 5% risk for isolated large hail for the slight risk in the New England corridor there. And then for tomorrow, we do have a dual slight risk setup, one for the Central Plains and one for the New England corridor, attached by a marginal risk that runs through the Ohio River Valley and the mid-Mississippi River Valley. Risks for tomorrow do include a risk for an isolated tornado or two for both locations, the risk for some scattered damaging wind gusts for both locations as the primary fueling risk for both of these slight risk locations, as well as a 15% damaging wind or a 15% hail risk for the Central Plains, where we could see the potential for some scattered large hail, as well as a 5% hail risk for the New England corridor, where we could see the potential for some isolated large hail. Then for day 3 outlook, we do have a marginal risk for the high plains and the New England corridor, where we could see the potential for some isolated severe thunderstorms upcoming, and then we don't have anything issued for day 4, day 8 outlook. Taking a look at our excessive rainfall forecast, for today we do have a slight risk for the enhanced risk region in the Midwest into the Ohio River Valley, where we could see the potential for some scattered flash flooding, and areas that are going to be prone to flooding near waterways and in low-lying areas could see the possibility of some significant accumulation in some very isolated areas. However, it will likely be pretty rare for that to happen, but definitely entirely possible, especially if you know an area, or if you yourself live in an area that is prone to flooding, and whenever you get a lot of heavy rainfall over a short period of time, but we aren't really expected to see all that much of a risk for significant flash flooding, but scattered flash flooding is definitely going to be a risk for this region. And we also do have 2 additional marginal risks, one for the New England corridor in 2 locations that extends across Pennsylvania, New York, into northern Vermont there, as well as a small marginal risk for Massachusetts, northern Connecticut, and northern Rhode Island, where we could see the potential for some isolated flash flooding, as well as a marginal risk for the Southwest, where for the Las Vegas region, Southern California, Arizona, into southwestern New Mexico, where we could see the potential for some isolated flash flooding due to monsoon season in that region. For tomorrow, we do have a slight risk across the Ohio River Valley, where we could see the potential for some scattered flash flooding. And then for a day 3 outlook, we do have a slight risk for southern Colorado into northern and central New Mexico, where we could see the potential for some scattered flash flooding. Taking a look at our surface analysis before we get into anything too deep, we do have a outflow boundary that is currently positioned across Iowa into southern Wisconsin. This is going to be the initiating boundary for our storms. We do have a little bit of convection, a little bit of rainfall across Minnesota and Wisconsin that did push out an outflow boundary. Again, that is going to be the initiating boundary for our super strong MCS. We do have a little bit of a cold front that is behind, that is across the central plains here, and this may move into the region later on and merge with our outflow boundary after storms have already initiated, and that may support some additional support backing our storms. However, once our storms are going, they're going to continue going because they will have access to an insane amount of instability across this region, but that outflow boundary will be that initiating boundary. But take a notice, or take a look at least take notice of how the outflow boundary is positioned, how it is pretty parallel to the northern border, or it kind of runs pretty straight, goes from west to east. It isn't really top to down, it is left to right. With it being in that configuration there, we will have a lot of backing in the winds in the southern half of that outflow boundary, and then to the north of that outflow boundary that will push further off to the west. But with our upper level flow will be basically parallel to the outflow boundary, leading to a linear storm development, which will be overall more favorable for the potential of damaging wind gusts than the possibility of tornadoes, although the possibility of tornadoes is still a very large risk for today, and definitely something that needs to be taken into account. Tornadoes are still absolutely possible, even if the storm mode won't be the most favorable for it. Taking a look at our weather model, starting off with our upper air pattern and our 500 millibars, and how that's going to work in conjunction with our surface analysis for our risk for severe thunderstorms. We do have a pretty decent trough across this region that is digging into the Midwest with some decent flow that is going to be associated with our storms upwards of 40 to 45 knots across this region. That will support our risk for severe thunderstorms and support a lot of upscale growth and a lot of rapid upscale growth, and just generally supporting our risk for severe thunderstorms across this region. And then take into account the position of the outflow boundary that I was talking about earlier across Iowa into Wisconsin here. I could draw that a little bit better, but look at our wind vectors. They could switch into a little bit more of a southerly component, but are probably going to be pretty parallel as our storms initiate. And that will definitely lead to a lot more of a linear system than storms forming into more of an isolated system. Again, storms will definitely be much more linear and will be significantly more favorable for the potential of damaging wind gusts, but also embedded tornadoes are, again, still possible, but won't be entirely favored by our storm mode. Taking a look at our 700 millibars and our low-level jet and how that's going to affect our risk for tornadoes across this region. If I zoom in here, so it's a little bit clearer, and let me organize what we're actually looking at. So we will have a lot of strong 700 millibar flow backing our storms, and a little bit more limited 700 millibar flow that is going to be ahead of our storms that will actually be available for the MCS to use for tornadic development, and may organize those updrafts and getting them to spin and supporting tornadic development. This line here, anything to the west of this line will not be associated with the possibility for tornadoes, but anything ahead of this line will be able to be used by the powerful MCS to support the potential for tornadoes embedded in that line. We definitely have significantly more limited 700 millibar flow, and definitely a much more weaker low-level jet that will still support quite a lot of directional shear across this region and the possibility for tornadoes. But with a more modest low-level jet, we will see a more modest risk for tornadoes on top of this being more of a linear system. But again, this low-level jet will still be absolutely available and will definitely support the potential for tornadoes embedded in this line. Taking a look at our 200 millibar winds and how that's going to affect our risk for severe thunderstorms and our risk for hail. We don't really have a whole lot of 200 millibar flow across this region that's really going to be feeding into this region. It is going to be mainly off to the north, so we won't really see all that much of an aid as far as shear goes from our 200 millibars. So we will definitely see a much more modest risk for hail as a result. And we also don't really have any noticeable defluence or spreading of our wind vectors that is going to be across this region that will enhance our risk for severe thunderstorms. So not really a whole lot of support coming out of our 200 millibars, but you can definitely see based on our wind vectors compared to our outflow boundary that's going to be across Iowa into southern Wisconsin, that our wind vectors are pretty parallel and definitely going to be significantly more supportive of a linear system than all that much of a isolated system. And again, that will favor the possibility of significant damaging wind gusts over tornadoes, but again, tornadoes are still absolutely possible. Taking a look at our 0 to 3 kilometer storm relative velocity and how this is going to affect our risk for tornadoes across this region, we are expected to see some decent storm relative velocity values ahead of this powerful MCS and possible Derecho that is going to be getting upwards of 200 meters squared a second squared storm relative velocity, and that is honestly pretty decent for storm relative velocity, and we'll definitely be able to support the possibility of tornadoes embedded in this line. Again, tornadoes are possible for today, even if it isn't the main risk as far as our risk for severe thunderstorms go. Again, that will be given to our risk for damaging wind gusts and significant damaging wind gusts. Although you still need to be watching out for the possibility of tornadoes if you do live in the affected region, because tornadoes are still absolutely possible, especially with a lot of instability that we're going to look at and some pretty decent storm relative velocity values. Taking a look at our bulk shear and how that's going to affect our risk for hail and our risk for severe thunderstorms overall. Because we don't really have all that great strong 500 millibar or 200 millibar flow, we will see much more modest bulk shear values and a much more modest risk for hail as a result. So we won't really have a whole lot of shear or speed shear at least backing our storms, so we won't really see all that much of a risk for hail. But we do have some pretty decent 500 millibar flow and not a whole lot of 200 millibar flow as a result, and that's mainly just going to lead to a lower end risk for hail across this region and potentially less sheared storms, and maybe even taking down the intensity of storms a little bit as a result. However, when we look at our instability later, I have a feeling that's probably going to override our shear. Taking a look at our temperatures and how that's going to affect our instability, we are expected to see quite a lot of heat across this region, with temperatures in the warm sector that are expected to get upwards of what seems to be 80 to 85 and even 90 degrees across this region. It's definitely going to be pretty hot, definitely not going to be as hot as what you're seeing in the Central Plains, but definitely pretty hot and definitely pretty supportive of quite a lot of instability across this region as a result. Taking a look at our dew points and how that's going to affect our instability and in turn our risk for severe thunderstorms, we have a lot of moisture across this region. It is probably pretty stuffy, I would imagine, just being outside as a result of how much moisture is in the atmosphere. Because our dew points are absolutely absurd, with dew points that are getting upwards of what seems to be 70 to 75, and looks like it's even getting into our upper 70s there. So we have a lot of moisture, and that will be more than enough to support our instability and support a lot of instability as a result, on top of our pretty hot temperatures across this region. So taking a look at our lapse rates and how that's going to affect our risk for severe thunderstorms, primarily our instability and maybe our risk for hail, we will see some pretty decent lapse rates values across this region, and they aren't going to be anything too crazy, but they're also not going to be nothing. We are expected to see lapse rates values ahead of our storms that are going to be getting upwards of 6 to 7 across this region, and that will definitely support quite a lot of instability across this region, and in turn enhance that risk for severe thunderstorms. And as far as our hail risk goes, again, we do have some pretty weak bulk shear values. However, we have some decent lapse rates values, and that will aid in our risk for hail, as it will expand our layer for hail development and move that layer for hail development closer down to the ground. It will be easier to reach with a strong updraft, and hail particles or rain particles will be able to be suspended in that layer for hail development for longer, and in turn increasing that risk for hail across this region. But without a whole lot of bulk shear across this region, these lapse rates are only gonna be able to go really so far. But again, our risk for hail is definitely going to be on more of a back burner risk as a result, but still possible across this region. Taking a look at our cloud cover and how that's going to affect our instability and our risk for severe thunderstorms as a result, we are expected to see a little bit of cloud cover across this region, at least to start off with. We do have some somewhat thick mid-level and low-level cloud cover across this region. It's still going to allow the sun to reach the ground. It's still going to allow for surface heating across this region. Definitely won't really impact our risk for severe thunderstorms all that much, and will support quite a lot of instability across this region as a result. Taking a look at our most unstable cape and how that's going to fuel our severe thunderstorms across this region, we are expected to see an insane amount of instability across this region, with cape values that are going to be getting upwards of 4,500 and even approaching 5,000 across this region. A lot of models have been indicating upwards of 5,000 joules per kilogram of instability across this region, which I honestly wouldn't be too surprised if that was the case, because our high resolution ensemble forecast is significantly more conservative. And when we look at our surface-based cape in a moment, the majority of our most unstable cape is going to translate down to our surface. Spoiler alert. But when we switch between our minimum, our maximum, and our mean for this model, you will see just how absolutely strong our models are predicting our instability to be. And with instability values upwards of 4,500 to 5,000 joules per kilogram of instability across this region, that will likely override the lack of strong bulk shear across this region, and support a risk for large hail across this region, even amongst some weaker bulk shear values, just because our updrafts will be so strong. But again, that will only be able to go so far, because we don't really have a whole lot of bulk shear, which will definitely affect our risk for hail as a result. But outside of hail, stronger updrafts will in turn lead to stronger downdrafts and a stronger risk for damaging wind gusts across this region. And with an abundance of instability across this region and pretty decent storm relative velocity values and a decent low-level jet, embedded tornadoes are definitely a very big risk embedded in this powerful MCS for today. So again, even if you're more so concerned on the risk for damaging wind gusts, please make sure you are watching out for the risk on tornadoes. I know I've been constantly talking about it throughout this entire forecast so far, because I really want it to be drilled into your brain that the risk for damaging wind gusts is not going to be the only risk for today. Again, tornadoes are absolutely possible and is going to be a pretty decently sized risk compared to our risk for damaging wind gusts, which again will be the larger risk, but tornadoes are still a very big risk for today. Taking a look at our surface-based cape and how that's going to affect our risk for severe thunderstorms, primarily surface-based storms across this region, and the risk for tornadoes. The majority of our most unstable cape is expected to translate down to our surface-based cape. So surface-based storms will be across this region, and that will allow for the possibility of tornadoes across this region as well. And we do have the same 4,000 to 4,500 joules per kilogram of instability across this region as we just saw on our most unstable cape. However, if we switch to our ensemble maximum, which is what one specific model run is indicating, that has the maximum amount of instability across this region. So it could be probably our NAM nest, knowing how robust it likes to get, and kind of just how crazy it is compared to our other models. It's scary to see that this is a possible outcome for our risk for severe thunderstorms and a solution that could absolutely happen. Again, our ensemble mean is the most likely scenario because it combines all of our model solutions. Our ensemble maximum is at least 5,000 joules per kilogram of instability. Doesn't get quite up to 6,000 joules per kilogram of instability. I know that our standalone HRRR was in some regions. However, this is just scary to see because with even modest storm relativity values, I would think that the possibility for a significant tornado would be there, even if we may not see the risk for tornadoes to be as widespread, or if we have more modest storm relativity values. Again, very, very strong amounts of instability could support very, very strong updrafts, and in turn, maybe the possibility of a significant tornado. I definitely wouldn't entirely rule that out. I definitely think that's a possibility, especially with the possibility of widespread instability values getting upwards of 5,000 joules per kilogram. Taking a look at our 0 to 3 kilometer instability and how that may aid in fueling our risk for severe thunderstorms, we will see a pretty nice corridor of some pretty decently strong 0 to 3 kilometer instability that is going to be sitting across this region, across northern down into central Illinois and central Indiana into Ohio. And this pretty decent corridor of 0 to 3 kilometer instability will definitely be a pretty big aiding factor in supporting the potential for severe thunderstorms, including the potential for tornadoes across this region, and just fueling those updrafts overall. The 0 to 3 kilometer instability just being there is something interesting to see. Taking a look at our energy helicity index values and how that will indicate the potential for tornadoes across this region, we have some pretty high energy helicity index values across this region, which I honestly was not expecting to see whenever I switched to this model. We have energy helicity index values on this HRRR run that is getting upwards of 11, 12, and 10, which is absolutely insane. We can just pull a sounding here and just look, and this is honestly a sight to behold here. We have insane amount of instability, upwards of 5,000, I think 400 joules per kilogram of instability there, small on my monitor, and very, very nice curvature in the low levels of the hodograph. Not a whole lot of shear in the mid levels, but we have a decently elongated hodograph in the extreme upper levels of our atmosphere. That is definitely indicating the possibility of tornadoes as well as the possibility of hail, so we do have quite a lot of shear in the extreme upper levels of our atmosphere, despite our 200 millibars being a little bit more on the weaker side of things. But honestly, this is just a sight to behold. We have extremely strong instability here, and quite a lot of storm relativity, with storm relativity values upwards of 280. I honestly don't really know what to say here, because this is just like this is absurd. Again, tornadoes are absolutely possible. We have super strong instability, a lot of storm relativity, and very, very nice looking hodographs, and our effective layer STP with convective inhibition is extremely high. Again, tornadoes are absolutely possible. I don't really know what else to say, including the possibility of a significant tornado. I definitely can't rule that out. I just primarily think, or at least I hope, that our storm mode will definitely mitigate a lot of the tornado risk, because linear mode will definitely be not all that favorable for the potential for tornadoes. But again, embedded tornadoes are still absolutely possible, definitely by the look of this sounding. Taking a look at our mesoanalysis page for our risk for hail and damaging wind gusts, starting off with our damaging wind gust risk, we do have a Derecho composite parameter value upwards of 12 across Iowa here, which is definitely quite indicative of the possibility of a derecho progressing through this region. Again, that is a huge possibility for today. Again, a derecho is entirely possible. I've been referring to it as a powerful MCS because it may not be a derecho, but it is still possible that it could be a derecho today, with the possibility of embedded tornadoes that could be quite dangerous and could potentially be significant. And taking a look at our D cape, or in other words, our downdraft cape, it's kind of like the opposite of our cape, and shows how strong our downdrafts are going to be than our updrafts. So we have a lot of D cape across this region with values upwards of 1,300, 1,200 joules per kilogram of D cape across this region. So definitely a lot of potential energy for sinking air to use, and that will definitely be unleashed whenever we get some downdrafts going across this region. So again, quite a lot of D cape will definitely harbor that risk for damaging wind gusts and significant damaging wind gusts across this region. Then we can also look at our hail risk as well. We do have the possibility for some hail. It's definitely on the back burner, but we do have a 24 and a 20 for large hail parameter in eastern Iowa as of right now. This is an hour or so before storm development actually does begin. So we're kind of in line for that risk for severe thunderstorms, but is likely going to be a little bit behind because storms haven't really fully gotten going yet, but it is already indicating the overlap of ingredients for hail across this region and the possibility for some large hail. And then we can also look at our other hail composite parameters, like our significant hail parameter, where we do have a 3 as of right now, indicating the overlap for the possibility of maybe some significant hail across this region, but definitely indicating the possibility of hail regardless. For our SARS hail size, we do have upwards of 4, which is actually quite interesting, knowing that we don't really have a whole lot of bulk shear across this region, and in turn a more modest risk for hail across this region. But our SARS hail parameter, or SARS hail size, is indicating upwards of 4 inches in diameter for some of our hail across this region. Then for our SARS significant hail percentage, we do have upwards of 90 in the red there, and upwards of 80 in the deeper yellow. So it is already indicating the overlap of our ingredients for hail across this region, and maybe even the possibility of some significant hail, but with the lack of some decent bulk shear, and not a whole lot of speed shear across this region. We do have some decent speed shear that wasn't really being indicated by models, upwards of 45 to 50 knots across this region. So it is indicating the overlap of our ingredients for hail across this region, and maybe some significant hail as well, definitely being indicated by our SARS hail size. Now that I've told you the weather, please go down to the description and check out the socials for Project Gladiator and join the Discord for any updates on Project Gladiator. If you live in any of the areas I covered for today, please stay weather alert for the time being. If you notice anything might have been wrong this forecast, or would like to make a suggestion or ask a question, please leave a comment. 3 other channels I highly suggest you check out are One Nation Weather, Weather Watcher, JaxonWX, and hopefully I'll be able to see you guys tomorrow in another forecast. Actually, no, that's not going to be possible because I am leaving for vacation again tomorrow. That actually kind of came out of nowhere for me even. I wasn't really expecting that either. So sorry that I'm already leaving out again for vacation. I know that I did say I would try to make some forecasts while on vacation last time, and I didn't really do that. I mean, I did do the one with Hurricane Beryl and that tornado outbreak. I'll try to do some forecasting over this vacation, but please forgive me, and please be understanding if I don't actually get around to making forecasts while on vacation this time. But maybe I'll see you guys in another forecast by earliest probably on the 17th, by latest probably around Saturday or Sunday.